Montana Territory, 1882. The land was still raw and untamed, where the horizon stretched farther than dreams and the sky hung so vast it could swallow a person whole. In Copper Creek, a mining town that had seen its glory days fade with the depleted veins in the mountainside, 23-year-old Abigail Garner stood at the window of her father's general store, watching dust devils dance across the wide main street. "Abigail, the inventory needs checking before sundown," her father called from the back room. "Yes, Papa," she answered, turning away from the window with a sigh. At 23, Abigail Abby, to those who bothered to know her, had long accepted certain truths about her life. She was not the type of woman men noticed, not in the way they noticed the slender, delicate flowers who occasionally bloomed in this harsh terrain. She was substantial, with generous curves that no amount of corset tightening could disguise. Her brown hair, while thick and healthy, lacked the golden luster that turned heads. And though her face was pretty enough with warm hazel eyes and full lips, it was framed by cheeks too round for fashion's approval. But Abby had other gifts: quick wit, a nurturing heart, and hands that could mend anything from a torn shirt to a broken spirit. Not that anyone in Copper Creek seemed to value such things. To most, she was simply the fat Gibson girl, destined to care for her widowed father until he, too, left her alone. "No man will court damaged goods," her aunt had warned after the fever that took her mother had nearly claimed Abby too, leaving her with a slight limp. "Best make yourself useful instead of dreaming." So she'd buried her girlish dreams of romance beneath practicality, convincing herself that the frontier was no place for silly notions of love. Out here, survival was what mattered. Everything else was a luxury few could afford. That afternoon, as Abby meticulously counted bolts of calico and measured coffee beans, the bell above the store door jangled. She looked up to see a stranger, a young man she'd never laid eyes on before, and her breath caught in her throat. He stood tall in the doorway, trail dust still clinging to his clothing. Yet even through the grime of travel, there was no mistaking his striking features. No more than 25, he had a strong jaw, clear blue eyes, and the kind of smile that transformed his whole face. His cowboy hat was pushed back on his head, revealing dark blonde hair that curled slightly at his collar. Unlike many of the rough miners and weathered ranchers who frequented the store, he carried himself with an easy grace that spoke of confidence without arrogance. "Afternoon," he said, his voice pleasant and unexpectedly gentle. "Name's Henry Evans, just hired on at the Circle M." He approached the counter with a list in hand. "Ranch is running low on supplies." Abby nodded, hoping her face wasn't as flushed as it felt. "Welcome to Gibson's General Store. I'm Abigail Gibson. My father and I run the place." Henry's eyes met hers directly, without the usual flick away that men gave her, that dismissive glance that said they'd seen all they needed to see. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Gibson." He handed over the list. "Might take a while to fill. The boss is stocking up for winter." "I don't mind," Abby replied, already scanning the neat handwriting. "You can look around while I gather everything, or there's coffee by the stove if you're parched from the trail." For the next hour, Abby moved about the store, collecting the items on the list. She was acutely aware of the cowboy's presence as he examined shelves, occasionally picking up an item to inspect it. Several times she caught him watching her, and each time he offered that same warm smile instead of looking away. As she placed the last items on the counter, their fingers brushed, sending an unfamiliar jolt through her arm. "That's quite a collection of books you have," Henry said, nodding toward the small shelf near the window. "Didn't expect to find Thoreau and Whitman in a mining town store." Abby's eyes widened. "Those are mine, actually. Papa lets me keep them here. Do you read them?" "Whenever I can get my hands on them." His smile deepened. "Long nights on the trail give a man time to think. Good books give him something worth thinking about." Before Abby could respond, the door flew open, and in strode Lucinda Walsh, the banker's daughter and widely considered the beauty of Copper Creek with her golden curls and tiny waist. She stopped short at the sight of Henry, her practiced smile blooming instantly. "Why, hello there," she cooed, ignoring Abby completely. "You must be new to town. I'm Lucinda Walsh." Henry tipped his hat politely. "Henry Evans, miss. Just passing through on ranch business." "Well, Mr. Evans, you simply must come to our social on Saturday night. Everyone who's anyone in Copper Creek will be there." She batted her eyelashes. "I could introduce you around." "That's mighty kind," Henry replied, but his eyes drifted back to Abby. "Will you be attending, Miss Gibson?" Lucinda's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Oh, Abby never comes to socials." "She's far too busy with the store, aren't you, dear?" Abby's cheeks burned. The store does keep me occupied. See, Lucinda turned back to Henry, but do say you'll come. 8 o'clock at the Walsh residence. After Lucinda finally swept out, Henry turned to Abby. Is that true, you never attend socials? Abby busied herself with tallying his purchases. I'm not much for dancing. That's a shame, something in his voice made her look up. I expect you'd have interesting things to say, more so than most. When Henry left with his supplies loaded in the wagon, Abby tried to dismiss the flutter in her chest. Men like Henry Evans didn't look twice at women like her, regardless of what books they read. He was being kind, nothing more. And kindness was not the same as interest. Yet 3 days later, when Abby was delivering medicine to old Mrs. Fletcher on the edge of town, she rounded a corner and nearly collided with Henry's horse. Miss Gibson, he exclaimed, quickly dismounting. You're a welcome sight, I was just heading to your store. Is the ranch needing more supplies already? She asked, adjusting her bonnet that had been knocked askew. No, ma'am, his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. I was hoping to borrow a book if you'd be willing, finish the last one I had, and the ranch is mighty short on reading material. Oh, Abby couldn't hide her surprise. Of course, which do you prefer? I have Thoreau, Whitman, some Dickens. I trust your recommendation, he said. Whatever you think worth reading must surely be so. They walked together toward the store, Henry leading his horse by the reins. For the first time in years, Abby found herself talking freely, discussing her favorite passages from Leaves of Grass and the way Thoreau's words made her yearn for deeper woods than the scrubby pines surrounding Copper Creek. Why, Miss Gibson, Henry said as they reached the store, I do believe you've been hiding your light under a bushel basket. Hardly a light, she replied with a self-deprecating smile. Just notions that don't fit well in a place like this. Henry's expression grew serious. I've found that what fits and what matters aren't always the same thing. That evening, Abby selected her cherished copy of Emerson's essays to lend Henry. She wrapped it carefully in brown paper, telling herself it meant nothing special. But when she pressed it into his hands the next day and saw the genuine pleasure in his eyes, something long dormant stirred within her. On Saturday night, Abby sat by the window of her small bedroom above the store, a half-finished piece of mending forgotten in her lap as she imagined the gaiety at the Walsh social. She pictured Henry dancing with Lucinda, their golden heads bent close in conversation, and felt a pang so sharp it startled her. Foolish girl, she whispered to herself. As if you haven't learned by now. A knock at the store's front door roused her from her melancholy. Frowning, she made her way downstairs. Her father was playing cards at the saloon, as he did most Saturday nights. Who would come calling at this hour? When she opened the door, lamplight in hand, Henry Evans stood on the porch, still dressed in his ranch clothes rather than social finery. Mr. Evans. Aren't you supposed to be at the Walsh social? He removed his hat, turning it in his hands. I was headed there, but found I had questions about a particular passage in Emerson that wouldn't wait. Questions about Emerson, she repeated slowly. His smile was sheepish now. Truth is, Miss Gibson, I'd rather discuss books with you than make small talk with strangers, unless you think that's too forward of me. Abby hesitated only a moment before stepping aside to let him in. I have coffee on the stove, and please call me Abby. Abby, he said, as if testing the feel of it on his tongue. Then I'm Henry. They sat by the store's pot-bellied stove as the evening deepened, talking not just of books but of dreams. His of saving enough to buy his own small spread, hers of seeing the great cities of the East one day. He told her of growing up in Kansas, losing his parents to a tornado when he was 16, and drifting west with nothing but determination and his father's old saddle. I've been a hired hand ever since, he said. But I'm saving every penny. Another year or two, and I'll have enough for a start. When he finally rose to leave, the mantel clock showed it was nearly midnight. I've kept you up scandalously late, he said, looking genuinely contrite. I don't mind, Abby replied truthfully. It's been nice to have someone to talk to. He paused at the door. The ranch has me riding fence lines all week, but would you permit me to call on you properly next Saturday? Perhaps we could walk by the creek if the weather holds. Abby's heart thundered in her ears. I'd like that. After he left, she sat for a long time by the dying embers of the stove, afraid to examine too closely the hope blooming in her chest. Surely she was misreading his interest. A man like Henry, handsome and hardworking, could have his pick of women, yet the way he'd looked at her, the week crawled by. Twice Henry stopped at the store on ranch business, and both times he lingered, finding reasons to talk with her away from her father's curious gaze. By Saturday, rumors had already begun circulating around Copper Creek. That new cowboy from Circle M's sweet on Abigail Gibson, Abby overheard Mrs. Whitman tell the milliner. Can't imagine what he sees in her, poor thing. Probably after old Gibson's store, the milliner replied. Man doesn't come courting a girl like that unless there's something else he's after. The words stung, but they weren't unfamiliar. Abby had heard variations all her life, whispered speculations about why any man would look twice at the big Gibson girl, unless he wanted something, her father's business, a convenient housekeeper, or worse. When Henry arrived for their walk, dressed in clean denims with his hair still damp from washing, Abby's doubts nearly overwhelmed her. Is something wrong? He asked as they left town, noting her unusual quiet. She stopped, gathering her courage. Why are you doing this, Henry? His brow furrowed. Doing what? This, she gestured between them. Walking out with me, there are prettier girls in town, ones without, she broke off, embarrassed. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Without what? Your intelligence, your kindness, your way of seeing beauty in things others overlook. He stepped closer. Abby, I've worked ranches from Kansas to Montana, met all kinds of people, and I've never enjoyed anyone's company more than yours. But I'm not. You're not what others think you should be, he finished for her. Neither am I. Never wanted to be. I'd rather have someone real than someone who fits other people's notions of proper. He offered his arm again, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. As they walked along the creek, Henry told her about the abandoned cabin he'd discovered while riding fence, a homesteader's place empty now but still sound. It needs work, he said, but the land around it is good, water's reliable. Could be a fine start for someone willing to put in the effort. It sounds lovely, Abby said, picturing it. Will you try to claim it? Been thinking on it. Circle M's not using that section. He glanced at her. Would you like to see it someday? The invitation hung between them, weighted with possibilities neither was ready to name. I would, she replied softly. Summer crept toward autumn, and with each passing week, Henry found reasons to be in town, to stop at the store, to walk Abby home from church. They exchanged books and ideas, arguments and laughter. He told no one but her about the claim he'd filed on the homesteader's land, or how he worked extra shifts to buy lumber for repairs. For her part, Abby tried to guard her heart, to remember that men didn't choose women like her for anything lasting. Yet the way Henry looked at her when she spoke passionately about something she'd read, or the gentle way he'd begun to touch her hand or arm, these things made her defenses crumble. The day everything changed began ordinarily enough. Abby was alone in the store, her father having gone to meet a supply wagon in the next town. The bell jangled, and she looked up from her ledger to see three rough-looking men enter, trail dust thick on their clothes, hard eyes scanning the merchandise. Help you gentlemen? She asked, instinctively wary. The tallest, a man with a scar bisecting one eyebrow, approached the counter. Need supplies, ammunition mainly. His gaze traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Maybe other things. As she reluctantly gathered what he asked for, the bell rang again. Henry stepped in, stopping short at the sight of the strangers. Something passed across his face, recognition, then alarm. Abby, he said evenly, not taking his eyes off the men. Your father was asking for you at the livery. Well now, said the scarred man, his hand moving to rest on his holstered gun. If it ain't Henry Evans. Long way from Kansas, ain't you, boy? Didn't expect to see you, Riker, Henry replied, his voice taut. Thought you'd be in prison by now. The man Riker laughed an ugly sound. Dodged that bullet. Like I dodged the ones you sent my way when you sold out the gang. Abby stood frozen, confused by the exchange. Henry had never mentioned knowing outlaws or being involved with a gang. Abby, Henry said again, this time with urgency. Go find your father. But Riker moved between her and the door. No, the lady stays. Got some catching up to do with our friend here. Seems he's found himself a new life. Even a new girl. His eyes slid to Abby again, assessing her figure with a smirk, though his taste has sure changed. One of Riker's companions snickered. Maybe he likes him with more to grab onto these days. Heat flooded Abby's face. Henry's expression hardened. Leave her out of this, he warned. It's me you want to settle with. Oh, we'll settle all right, Riker said. Boys, tie her up. Evans and I are going to have a little talk outside. The next moments blurred together. As one of the men reached for her, Abby swung the heavy ledger book, catching him in the temple. He stumbled and she bolted for the back door. Henry lunged at Riker and the third man drew his gun. Shots exploded in the confined space of the store, shattering the stillness of the afternoon. Abby made it to the storeroom but heard a grunt of pain behind her. Turning, she saw Henry stagger, his hand pressed to his side where crimson bloomed through his shirt. Still he kept coming, pushing her through the door ahead of him. "Run," he gasped, "get help." But she couldn't leave him wounded. Instead, she grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the back alley, where a stack of empty crates provided temporary cover. Behind them, cursing and the crash of overturned shelves indicated the outlaw's pursuit. "You need to go," Henry insisted, grimacing with pain. "They're after me, not you." "I'm not leaving you to bleed to death," she hissed, tearing a strip from her petticoat to press against his wound. "What did they mean about a gangs?" Henry's face twisted with shame. "I ran with them years back after my parents died, was young, angry, did things I'm not proud of." His breathing was labored, "but I got out. Testified against them when they killed a family during a robbery, been running ever since." The confession should have shocked her, should have made her recoil. Instead, all Abby felt was fierce protectiveness. "That's why you move from ranch to ranch." He nodded. "Never stayed anywhere long enough for anyone to learn my past, until here, until you." His eyes held hers. "I should have told you." "You're telling me now," she said, then tensed as footsteps approached their hiding place. "Come out, Evans," Riker's voice called, "or we burn this whole place down with you and your fat little girlfriend inside." Henry struggled to rise. "I have to face him if I don't." "No," Abby's mind raced. The livery was just across the alley. If they could reach it, they might find help, or at least horses to escape on. "This way," she whispered, guiding him toward a narrow gap between buildings. They had almost made it when gunfire erupted again. Henry cried out, falling against her as a bullet grazed his arm. Abby stumbled under his weight, her bad leg giving way, sending them both tumbling into the open. "There they are," shouted one of Riker's men. Abby scrambled to her feet, positioning herself in front of Henry, who was trying to rise but failing. "Stay behind me," she said, even as she wondered what possible protection she could offer against armed outlaws. Riker and his men advanced slowly, guns drawn. "Ain't this sweet," Riker drawled. "The little lady's protecting you, Evans. How the mighty have fallen." Just then, the thunder of hooves filled the alley. A group of riders rounded the corner, Circle M ranch hands returning from a cattle drive led by the ranch foreman. Seeing the standoff, they drew their weapons. "Drop those guns," the foreman shouted. "Town's got laws against shooting women and cowboys in the back alleys." Outmanned and suddenly in the open, Riker hesitated, his eyes narrowed at Henry. "This ain't over, Evans." "Actually it is," came another voice. Abby's father emerged from the livery, shotgun in hand, the sheriff beside him. "These men shot up my store and tried to kill my daughter. They're not going anywhere." In the chaotic aftermath, as Riker and his men were disarmed and marched to the jail, Abby stayed by Henry's side while the doctor was summoned. His wounds, though painful, weren't life-threatening, but the exposure of his past hung between them like a shadow. "I never meant to bring danger to your door," he told her when they were finally alone in the doctor's back room, his side bandaged, his face pale from blood loss. "Everything else I told you was true, Abby. Everything about how I feel, what I want." "I know," she said and realized she did. Whatever Henry had once been, she knew the man he was now. The man who discussed poetry and dreamed of his own land. The man who looked at her and saw someone worth knowing. "Rest now, we'll talk when you're stronger." But Copper Creek was already ablaze with gossip. Henry Evans, the handsome young cowboy from Circle M, revealed as a former outlaw. And Abigail Gibson standing in front of bullets to protect him. By evening, versions of the story had grown wilder with each telling. "They're saying he only courted you to use you as a shield," Lucinda Walsh told her with feigned sympathy when she stopped by the store the next day. "Or to get close to your father's money. Such a shame, Abby, but really you must have suspected something wasn't right. A man like that, interested in someone like you." For the first time, Abby didn't flinch at the implied insult. "Henry Evans is twice the man of anyone in this town," she said evenly. "And whatever he once was, he's more than paid for it. Now, if you're not here to buy something, I have inventory to complete." Lucinda's mouth fell open at the uncharacteristic steel in Abby's voice. She left without another word. When Henry was well enough to leave the doctor's care 3 days later, he found Abby waiting for him outside. "I've come to take you home," she said simply, his eyes clouded with confusion. "Abby, my past is out now. The whole town knows your reputation. Is my concern, not theirs." She took his arm. "And home isn't the bunkhouse. My father and I agreed you should stay with us until you're fully recovered." He didn't argue, which told her how weak he still was. As they walked slowly toward the store, people stopped to stare or whisper behind their hands. Abby held her head high. That evening, after her father retired early with deliberate tact, Abby brought Henry tea on the small porch behind the store. "I need to leave Copper Creek," Henry said without preamble. "Riker's in jail, but he has friends, and the town will never let you forget about us." "About us," Abby repeated. "Is there still an us, Henry?" He looked at her with such naked longing that her breath caught. "There always will be for me, Abby, but I can't ask you to throw your life away on a man with my history." "You deserve better." "Better than a man who reads Emerson, who sees me when others look through me, who is willing to face down killers to protect me." She shook her head. "I don't want better, I want you." Henry's expression was anguished. "Abby, listen to me. I've been saving for that homestead, working towards something I could offer you, but it's not enough yet, and now, with my past exposed." "That homestead," she interrupted, "the claim you filed. Is it still valid?" "Yes, but—" "Then we'll make it work." She took his hands in hers. "I have savings too, and knowledge of what supplies we'd need. Between us, we could start something, Henry. If that's what you want." For a long moment, he simply stared at her, wonder dawning in his eyes. "Abigail Gibson, are you proposing we build a life together?" "I suppose I am." She didn't look away, though her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Unless your reservations about me are real and not just nobility talking." "Reservations about you?" He seemed genuinely bewildered. "Abby, from the moment I walked into this store and saw you counting inventory, I've been lost. You're the most beautiful, intelligent, compassionate woman I've ever known." "I'm not beautiful," she said automatically. His hand came up to cup her cheek. "You are to me. In every way that matters." And then finally he leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle press of lips that held more tenderness than passion but promised both in time. When they parted, Abby's eyes were damp. "People will talk," she warned. "They already are." "Let them," Henry said. "I've spent too many years running from who I was to run from who I want to be. And I want to be the man who stands beside you, who builds something lasting with you." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony attended only by her father, the pastor, and surprisingly, the Circle M foreman who brought a wedding gift, a milk cow, and the news that the ranch owner was willing to sell Henry some breeding stock on credit to start his herd. "Man's got to have a foundation," the foreman said gruffly, shaking Henry's hand. "Reckon you've found yours." That evening they drove a borrowed wagon to the homestead, their homestead now. The cabin was still rough, the land around it only partially cleared. But as the October sunset gilded the distant mountains, Abby thought she had never seen anything so beautiful. Henry lifted her from the wagon as if she weighed nothing, his wounds nearly healed, his strength returning. "Welcome home, Mrs. Evans," he said, setting her gently on the porch. "It needs work," Abby observed, looking around at the overgrown yard and weathered cabin. "So do I," Henry replied with a smile that reached his eyes. "Reckon that makes us a good match." Inside, he'd already prepared what he could, a bed with fresh straw ticking, a table with 2 chairs, a stove that only smoked a little. It wasn't much, but as Abby moved around the space, she saw not what it was but what it would become. Their home, their future. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, the newness of marriage still a wonderful shock to them both, Abby traced the scar forming on Henry's side. "I was so afraid I'd lose you," she whispered. He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "I spent most of my life believing I wasn't meant to be found in the first place. Too broken by what I'd done, too haunted to deserve peace." His voice was rough with emotion. "Then I walked into a general store in Copper Creek, and this remarkable woman looked at me like I mattered." "You do matter," Abby said fiercely. "You always did." "So did you," he countered. "Even when you couldn't see it yourself." Outside, the Montana night wrapped around their small cabin, vast and star-filled. Inside, 2 people who had never quite fit the world's expectations held each other close, finding in that embrace the home they'd both been seeking. As winter settled over the land, their homestead took shape, Henry's strong hands building, Abby's clever ones organizing. The town's whispers gradually gave way to reluctant respect as the Evans place thrived where others had failed. And if some still wondered what the handsome, reformed outlaw saw in the storekeeper's plump daughter, the question held less malice with each passing year. For in the end, it wasn't about what others saw or didn't see. It was about two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, not just love, but recognition of who they truly were and who they could become together. In a wild land that forgave little and forgot nothing, they had created something enduring. A place where kindness mattered more than appearances, where past mistakes couldn't overshadow present grace, and where love, once finally embraced, proved stronger than either had dared to hope.